Do you struggle with making decisions for your family because you're not sure if you're making the right ones? Do you fear what people might think if you decide to do something that might be slightly outside the box? Are you looking to gain more confidence in who you are as a mom in general? Welcome to the Possibility Mom Live. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you. Today, we're talking about a topic that I really, really, really love and has taken me a very, very, very long time to feel like I myself have handled. But before we get into it, if you are watching this on YouTube, I just want to say we're using a new camera. Do you like it? We're in full definition. You can see every pore on my face. Can you tell the difference? Let me know in the comments. And before we get into today's content, I, of course, want to take a moment and just say we announced something pretty big over on my YouTube channel. And we are just so excited to let you know that we are expecting baby number 9. And it is, a wild, wild, it is wild. We are very, very excited. And it was a wild announcement. To be very honest with you, I'm very overwhelmed by the love and the just outpouring of encouragement and support and all that fun stuff. So thank you so much for the incredible comments over on Instagram and over here on YouTube. We put together a video of my thoughts on being pregnant for the 9th time and how I have felt over the years in just growing in confidence, having fear, dealing with the unknown, all the things that you deal with when you get pregnant. And that's what really inspired me to kind of jump into in today's conversation, which is how do you know what is right for your family? How do you get confident that you're living a life that is going to lead you somewhere great? How do you deal when other people might say, like, hey, like what I think you're doing is crazy? I received honestly mainly incredibly positive comments about this 9th pregnancy, but of course, there's always one or two people who decide to be, kind of anonymous on the internet and share. I deleted the comment, but one of the comments that I received in feedback on being pregnant for the 9th time was something along the lines of, "Aren't you tired of opening up your you know what?" I was like, well, that's just an interesting comment. So again, I comments like this just don't bother me anymore, but they sure used to in the beginning. Oh my word, did I not have confidence in being a mom of many. It really only happened for me after my 5th baby, especially. I remember between babies 4 and 5. So if you've been following me for a while, that was the time of my minivan meltdown, the time of, my own personal transformation when I started changing my interior design business radically and then moving more into the space of motherhood and personal development. It was when we started vacationing to where I now live in Southwest Florida, and where we really started creating a life that was truly based on our own values, our own priorities, and the legacy that we want to leave. So, what I want to do today is dive into some of the ways that I think a mom can design her own life in her philosophy for what she wants for her family, so that she feels confident as a mom, so that she feels confident in her decisions, and that she feels like she's leading her family to a future full of hope. And so let's just dive right into this. The first thing that I think is really important to acknowledge is something that Brooke Castillo talks about in the Life Coach School, which is a manual. And essentially, what a manual, as she describes it, is that we might have like an instructional manual. Like my new iPhone that we're filming on right now has a manual for how to use it. You might have a totally unconscious manual for how to do things in your life. So, for example, you might have an idea, and this could be based on your upbringing, of course. This could be based on something you read when you were young, or something that was obviously just deeply impressed upon you in your formative years. You might have an idea for what it looks like. I know, here on a Sunday, what an ideal Sunday looks like. I'm bringing up this example because I know it's going to make my husband laugh. Because growing up for me as a family on Sundays, they were always, or at least one day on the weekend, a Saturday or a Sunday, it was always full of like intense socialization. So like cousins, aunts and uncles, extended Filipino community, family. It was full. And I remember telling my husband when we were, dating and engaged, like, oh my gosh, like I just want to do that every single weekend. Like I can't wait to, every single weekend spend time with, these specific people. And he was like, good luck with that. And, it was nothing against getting together with these specific people. We entertain a ton today. We entertain, quite a bit. Um, we are very social people, but he was like, we don't need to see the same group of people every single weekend. We have to have time for rest. We have to have time for ourselves. We have to have time for just our own family to do our own thing. It's not necessary to pack every single weekend full of activities. I did not really realize that I was coming into our marriage with this totally unconscious manual, so to speak, for what I thought an ideal weekend would look like. And so, of course, it took me several years to kind of be a bit more flexible with this. But now I love the way that we plan our weekends. We do not plan them full to the brim. We definitely see people, but it's usually like one social activity in a day. It's not like, hey, we're doing something in the morning and then we're doing something in the afternoon and then we're going here for the evening. It's typically just like one social activity in a day. I might go on my own and do more things, but where it comes like me and my husband and the kids all together, we protect our rest on the weekend. So I think the very first aspect, the very first component of being confident in your decisions for your family is becoming aware of any unconscious manuals you might have in any subject matter, right? So I know for some moms, sports are really important, but maybe for other moms, it's really not something that they want to make a priority. You could have an unconscious manual about how much time you spend with both sets of parents. Maybe it has to be completely equal, or maybe it has to be every weekend, for example. And that might not be what is best for your family. And what's key here is that typically these manuals we come into motherhood with are totally unconscious. Like you might have no awareness that you have sort of you're hanging on to a concept until obviously you're forced to make some decisions around it. For example, I was heavily programmed in extracurriculars. So I did ballet, violin, piano, this and that. I did literally multiple extracurriculars at one time. Am I grateful for them? Absolutely. I think my parents just really valued culture. I expressed interest in all of these things. And of course, as I got older, I did less and less of them. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when I become a mom? And I, became more open to being a mom of many. I remember thinking, how on earth is it possible for me to run around the city and be taking every single kid to every single activity? As I obviously became older and more confident in my identity as a mom of several children, I started to realize you can actually do a lot at home. You can bring in instructors to your home children interact and play with each other. There's actually quite a bit that can be done home based. Thinking that a child had to be involved in several activities at the same time and that all my kids had to be involved in things like extracurriculars all at the same time, taking over our evenings, multiple evenings a week, was a manual that I think I was holding on to that I very quickly realized, you know what? I actually really like this different way much better. So the very first step in being confident in the decisions you make for your family is to just become aware of any unconscious manuals you might have. And the easiest way to do that is to simply look at, where do you find yourself getting frustrated or anxious? Like when you think about, okay, I've got to sign up for summer camp, or, oh my gosh, what activities are my kids doing in the fall? Or I'm really concerned my kids only speak like one language. And again, I'm not trying to argue the validity or, just I'm not there. I'm neutral about all of the things that I just spoke about. And this is the point. You get to decide what is meaningful, valuable, important to your family, and what is neutral, to use that word. So that's step number one. Become conscious of things that you might be holding on to that you are treating as what Brooke Castillo calls as a manual. This thing that you have this like set list of rules and expectations that you unconsciously are saying this is the way it has to be, when maybe there's a whole other new manual that you could write that is completely based on you. And here is what brings me to the next point, which is to design a new manual. Okay, so what does it mean to design a new manual? It really is as simple as thinking about, how do you want to live your life? Not the way that maybe your mom lived her life or wants you to live yours, not the way your mother-in-law maybe wants you to live your life or the way she lives hers, not your best friends, not your sisters, not your Instagrammer that you follow, not your parenting expert. Again, we can draw inspiration and all that kind of stuff from all these resources, but you ultimately get to say, this is what I want my family's life to look like. This is how much time I want us to spend in leisure. This is how much time I want us to spend with other people. This is how much time I want us to spend in prayer. This is how much time I want us to spend outdoors, etc., etc., etc. And so if this feels overwhelming or you don't know where to begin, this is where I love to say is just begin to almost like a canvas, like the way that an artist would dress a room, or the way that like an interior designer would take a blank room and then put a whole bunch of stuff in it. Think about and draw inspiration from people you know, maybe also fiction, even fictional characters from books or other resources, and then maybe mentors or people in the public eye who you don't know but you admire. And you can literally take pieces from how they live their lives. So let me give you a couple of examples from my own personal life. I admire how uh, like literally I would encourage you to look at different arenas. We talk about this in the women's school, that there are different arenas of a woman's life. What they do for work, what their marriage looks like, how they interact with their kids, what their home looks like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are things about, like, I can think of specific people. So for example, my mother-in-law, Susan, she has a very genuine way of making people feel heard and known. And I remember over the years always observing this about her, the way she listens to people, the way she um uh like comes down to like especially children's level, the way she just always makes time to very, patiently spend time with people. I've always observed that about her and kind of literally took mental notes on, hey, this is what it looks like to make somebody feel listened to. My own mother, for example, is an incredible entertainer. She loves to fill her home with people. She loves to put out a gigantic feast. She loves to think about how she can make a feast meaningful, special. This is something about my dad too. My dad, um, I can remember this from my childhood. He would, go the extra mile on a vegetable platter and like turn the carrots into like flowers. He would carve them. He would make penguins out of boiled eggs and olives, with little like Q-tips and everything. Like, just my parents would throw incredible, incredible parties and feasts for people and make people feel very welcomed, and to provide incredible generous hospitality in their homes. And that is something that I've always noted, and I have absolutely emulated in my own home. Let me think of a fictional character. The mom in Little Women. She, to me, was like a woman of great resilience. Right there's, I won't share all the examples of how she's so resilient, but I remember I have read the book. I have watched all the movies, all the various permutations of the movies, and that's just what has always struck me about her, that she was this like incredibly tenacious, resilient woman. And so again, I was like, what does it look like to be resilient in the face of obstacles, in the face of struggles? Somebody who I admire, but I don't know personally, Joanna Gaines. She has this beautiful way of making homes look beautiful, but also creating, I think, like the way she does in her books and in her restaurant and her, obviously multiple homes she's created for people. She has this beautiful way of making things feel warm and beautiful, but with a lot of depth. It's not just about the aesthetics. There's a lot of depth in the way that she thinks. So those are just a couple of examples. This is what's so fun, is that you get to do this completely for yourself. You get to decide. You get to borrow from your childhood what you thought was amazing. You get to borrow from, maybe more modern to you resources on how to parent, on how to communicate. You get to borrow from mentors and leaders, from people who've written books, from your friends. Like, literally, you can look anywhere to women all over for inspiration for how to write your new manual. And so let me just come back to the example that I mentioned earlier. This concept of extracurriculars, right? I had to really like rewire that part. I just knew that I did not want to be the kind of mom that was running around, constantly. And also didn't want my kids to be kind of tired and not spend time with each other. And so I had to think of creative, strategic ways that this could be made possible. And so we did. We for us, that was actually a big impetus of moving to a smaller town. We moved to a smaller town with greater access to the outdoors and walkability. Our kids will bike to their, baseball, and everything is local, so it's a lot more manageable to do things like extracurriculars. And we do a lot together within extracurriculars as a family. Like, baseball for us is a perfect activity. There are so many other kids at baseball games and baseball practices. It becomes a really nice community type of thing where you see your friends, several times a week. And this was something that took me a while to kind of think, how could I make this look more unique to me? How could I make this look the way I want to do it? And I think there's things like screen time, for example. You might think that there is a very specific way that, a child should either have access to or not have access to screens. Again, it could be influenced by your childhood or by experts that you follow, but then you need to kind of make that your own. It's very easy to project into the future a lot of fear and a lot of, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm going to mess up my family. I'm going to mess up my child. But when you actually get to the present moment, it's just very different. And you can adapt and you can pivot and you can do what you need to do in any given moment. You always have the freedom to pivot. I remember thinking that about moving to Florida. Many people were like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? You guys are literally crazy. Why are you moving to Florida? You have so much community in Canada, on and on, whatever." People would, just again, it was always very generally, it was loving and it was just out of concern. I just remember it was actually a family member who came up to me at a family party and she was like, "You can always change your mind," like in a loving way. She was like, like, if you don't like it, you can always just come back." And I just remember being like, that's exactly it. Like, sure, there is some risk. Sure, there's expense. Sure, there's, a myriad of things that you need to think about, especially in something as big as a move. But that, I mean, that piece of advice was very valuable to me. And you can apply that thought of, well, we can always pivot at any time to basically almost anything. Almost anything, of course. There are some things that have more lasting impact, but many things in life you can pivot from without too much repercussion. And so I just think that's so important to remember. You get to write the manual for the life that you want for your family. And only you get to decide it, because guess whose life it is? It's not your mom's. It's not your sister's. It's not your brother's. It's not your best friend's. It is yours. You get to design it. All right. We call this in the woman's school rewiring a new self image. And that is what brings me to point number 3. Now that you have designed this like new idea for how you want these various aspects of your life to look, it's now time to make your brain a little bit more comfortable with it, because this is the part that can be very challenging. Our brains get very used to patterns. Like, they just do. You've heard me talk about this. I talk about this with the clients that I coach all the time. The challenge of habits is that it's a brand new pattern. This is why habits are so difficult to break and can be so difficult to start anew. If you've ever struggled with stopping eating a specific food or waking up early or going to bed earlier, you know what I'm talking about. We get ingrained in a certain pattern. Our brain believes that it's safe, it's the safest route for us to take. And we get to just tell our brains, actually, there's a safer way. This is not the only way. This is a safer way. So, here are a couple of suggestions for rewiring your self image and making all of this feel safe for your brain. The very first way is a vision board. I have a workshop that I teach called Future Full of Hope, and it is a super duper fun workshop where I teach people how to do a vision board. And really, what a vision board entails is that you are articulating this manual. You are articulating what it is you want for your life. And then you're finding images and words that help inspire you. And when you look at it, you're like, whoa, this is so fun. This is so exciting. This is so what I want. Um, the point of a vision board is to help inspire action. And what looking at a vision board does is essentially just makes the brain feel a little bit more safe. That, hey, what we're actually pursuing isn't scary, isn't unreasonable. It's actually going to be good for us. And it can be a really, really helpful tool. And I also want to mention another resource that I think is really great for casting vision for a family. And it's a book that Patrick Lencioni wrote called 3 Questions for a Frantic Family, a leadership fable for families. This is a book that I recommend to my clients often when they are starting to ask questions about, what do I want my life to look like? And in this book, he's telling the fictitious story of a family, but it's very, there's a lot of himself, I think, reflected in it, where the husband in the story is a like a business consultant, and they look at how businesses are organized and their organizational health. And he realized that his own family did not have the same principles that he was applying to these businesses that he was providing counsel for. And he realized, like, oh my gosh, we can actually do this in some simple ways He developed in this book something called a rallying cry, a way for, and then as well as a way for families to meet regularly, to discuss how their goals were going on this rallying cry. So it's a really, really good book. We'll link it for you in the description below. And he has a specific example about sports that I think was so interesting. In the book, he talks about how sports were absolutely taking over their family's life and how they decided to change it up and, move forward. So the third concept is rewire the self image, make it feel safe for your brain for you to potentially pursue something that might be very out of the box to other people, but for you is actually what you want for your family. And then number four is to connect this self image concept, which right now is still just in concept form. Now, to make it actual, to make it action, to make it become, not just words, but flesh, like actually real in your life, we need to connect it to activities in your calendar. A lovely woman who recently went through my signature time management program, Conquer Your Calendar, shared with me some feedback, and I will never forget it. It was so beautiful. She was talking about how one of the activities I do in Conquer Your Calendar is I get people to think about their legacy. What do they want to be remembered for? How do they want their kids to remember them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she was remarking how there were so many things that she did in her life that had absolutely nothing to do with her legacy. She would work for hours on these projects pursuing, perfectionism and pursuing excellence in them. And again, I'm not arguing don't be excellent at things, but she just realized via looking at things through the lens of a legacy that she like she could maybe have this little project or these assignments be good enough so that it wasn't robbing her from so much time from her family. So if good enough was maybe like 80% of her effort, but it allowed her to spend more time with her kids, which was hugely part of her legacy, she just sort of realized like, okay, let's explore what good enough looks like as opposed to perfectionism. And so we've got to connect any concept that we're trying to pursue to our calendar. So, for example, if I want to be a person who is physically fit, then there's got to be something in my calendar that looks like physical fitness. If I want to be a person of a deep prayer life, of a deep spiritual practice, well, certain things like going to church or praying regularly need to actually show up in my calendar. I can't remember exactly who. I feel like it was somebody like Michael Hyatt or Greg McKeown, but they were saying how you can see what people truly value when you open up their calendars. If you're able to look at a person's calendar and look at what is actually entered in there as priorities, you can tell what people really value. And that might be sobering to hear sometimes. But it's an important thing to ponder. Where we spend our time is indicative of what we prioritize. And oftentimes, from the women that I coach and the conversations I have via DM on my Instagram at Lisa Canning, what I hear a lot of is that it's other people's priorities are what actually ends up in people's calendars. And the way that you avoid that is by ensuring that your priorities are protected with appointments. And you can be able to say to somebody, I'm so sorry, I can't help you with that right now because my calendar doesn't allow it. This takes a little bit of courage. This takes a little bit of guts. This takes a little bit of discernment, which brings me to my next point, which is developing a plan for critics. So when we decide to step outside the box, when we decide to do something like leave the world of intense competitive sports, or when we decide to, something like me, move to Florida, or when we decide to move to the country, or when we decide to close up business and do something different, or leave a corporate job in order to pursue entrepreneurship, or leave entrepreneurship to pursue a corporate job, whatever it is, we're going to meet people who are going to express their opinion. And let's just be honest. I would say I want to say most of the time, at least for me, most of the time the criticism is because people care. Sometimes it's just, strangers on the internet criticizing is different. But in your real life with people, I would say that most of the time the criticism might be just because they really care and they want you to do well or they want you to thrive. And so it's coming from a place of goodness. So that's a really important thing to remember, first of all, is that most often um, the intent behind criticism is simply um, out of love. Okay. Sometimes it's not, and you have to figure that out, but a lot of the times it is. So just remember that first. But here are some techniques for how to deal with criticism. One of my most favorite phrases is, "Oh, that's so interesting. Tell me more about that." And then literally close your mouth and just let them talk. And literally, you can use that phrase again. "That's so interesting you feel that way. Like, tell me more about that." And I think what it does is that it allows the other person to feel heard, which again, when it's coming from a loving place, is what they want. They want you to hear their concern, but it doesn't validate necessarily what they're saying. That's so interesting. That's interesting you feel that way. It's not a combative statement. It's simply just inviting them to give a little bit of space. And then you can literally say something as simple as, "Thanks so much for sharing your opinion with me. I realize that you might be hearing this and you're like, that would never work, but I want you to try it. Just try it. Like, try it without an ounce of competition or combative or defensiveness. Like, just try it. Thanks so much for sharing your opinion with me. I'll take it to heart." And then you get to decide. You get to decide, is there something in this criticism that is of value? Is there something in this that I can learn? Is there something in this that is for me? Or is this really just about them and maybe their concern or their insecurity? I would get, over the years, I have gotten so many comments about the size of my family. And I remember in the very early years, it was so difficult for me to absorb, particularly, "Wow, you are so crazy." That was the hardest one for me. And I share this in my book, The Possibility Mom. I started to believe I was crazy because so many people were telling me, "Wow, you are so crazy to have that many kids." And I know these people weren't trying to be like hurtful or anything, but what I started to realize when I would have deeper conversations is that they were projecting, most of the time, people were projecting their overwhelm about thinking about themselves in that kind of a life. And I remember just sort of realizing, like, oh, this is actually more about them and not about me. And that provided me quite a bit of freedom. And so I guess really at the heart of it here is that no one else is living your life. You are the only one who gets to live your life. And you have quite a bit of agency in what that life looks like. And when we can kind of realize that we're not living our life to prove something to someone else, to present ourselves to someone else, to be perfect for someone else, or to perform for someone else, all the P's. This is straight from the Women's School Masterclass. All those P's: perform, prove, perfect, present. I'm missing one. There's a fifth P, but anyway. Uh, when we can acknowledge and then release that our life, the point of our life, is not about proving something to someone else, there is immense freedom that comes with that. And again, you might be thinking, okay, but like, how? I still don't get how. Well, here's the thing that we need to acknowledge. Again, it goes all the way back up to that number one that I shared with you, which is this whole concept of that you might have a manual. We have to first become aware that this is what we're doing. If you have a tendency to feel like you need to prove yourself to your parents, for example, just simply become aware of that. Oh, wow, I'm actually doing this because I want my parents to, whatever, like give me affirmation for what I've selected to do. Here's the thing with basing our life around the expectations of others, it just will never be enough. Like when we place our worth or our value upon someone else that is uncontrollable, like we cannot control the thoughts of others. That is just a reality. My mindset coach Erin Ingold tells me all the time. She just told me this yesterday. When we fight with reality, we will always lose. It is simply a reality. We can't control how other people think of us. We can only control our own thoughts. And again, there is so much freedom when we can acknowledge that. And so the how is really these 5 steps is number one, become aware that you have something unconscious that perhaps you've been carrying around with you. Number two, then look at what it looks like to design your own life the way you want to live it. Number three, rewire this new self-image, this new version of yourself that you want to see lived out. Number four, connect this new self-image to your calendar in actual actions. And then number five, simply just be prepared for when people either criticize or give you pushback or express their either concern or disappointment or anything, feedback on how you live. For people who maybe don't tell you directly and maybe in passive aggressive ways tell you what they think, or in passive aggressive ways, maybe you heard it from someone else or what have you. A phrase that I like to use is just in my own head is, oh, I wonder why she thinks that way. One huge tip or one huge thing that I've learned that has been so, so helpful to me in managing my thoughts is simply put distance between me and my thoughts. A phrase like, I wonder why she thinks that way. Like, let's say somebody passive aggressively sends you something that is, in contrary to how you live. Like, hey, I see that you drink milk. Here's an article I found about all the ways that milk is evil. Right? Whatever. That's a really random example, but and they don't even tell you. They don't just send you the article. Whatever. I'm just coming up with a really random example. Nobody has ever, nobody's ever done that to me in my life. I'm now going to get all these messages about milk. Anyway, my initial reaction might be to be like, who does she think she is? Why is she sharing this with me? She knows that I love drinking milk. Like, why would she even think to send this? And then you can start to spiral and you can start to get really mad. You start to get really frustrated. What I find really helpful is to, again, put that distance between myself and my thoughts, and a phrase like, I wonder why she thinks that way, allows me to pivot away from the resentment maybe, or the disgruntled, frustration or whatever, and then go to just more of a place of curiosity. I think it's a really great posture when we're dealing with critics to become curious. I wonder why she thinks that way. That's interesting. And then just like, that's it. I'm not even suggesting you necessarily dialogue. You can choose to dialogue, or you can choose to, just walk away from the comment, whatever. But in your mind, this is where we have the power, because we get to control our thoughts. We don't get to control the thoughts of anybody. We don't get to control the actions of anybody. We have the power to control our reactions. those are some of my thoughts on designing a life that you feel confident about, making decisions that you feel confident about for your family. Let's get to some of the questions and the comments. So Abigail says, I'm borrowing some things from you, Lisa Canning. You inspire me so much. You are so kind. Thank you for saying that. Abigail also says, I think that being authentic and to be real in social media, this is what I'm borrowing from you. Um, you're so sweet. You may, yes, you may borrow. And that's the cool thing about social media, I think. You can get access to all kinds of people. Now, of course, that this can be very challenging as well, because you can start to think, oh wait, shoot, like the way she does things is really cool. Oh, but wait, I really like the way she does things. Oh wait, maybe I need to, like, of course, this is the part that can be overwhelming if we give ourselves too much information and don't start to make some just decisions and distinctions. But it's also so cool because you can see, like, oh wow, this girl is so funny. What does she do that's so funny? Or this girl, is very confident in the way she communicates online. Like, what is it about her that is so confident? And you can just, again, observe, like literally take notes, like literally be like a student as if you're in university. I know that sounds weird, but whatever. Army says vision boards. Yes, I attended Lisa's course on this. I look at my vision boards every day and it always brings me so much joy. It gives me permission to dream big. Let me know, what are the big dreams you have in your heart? What are the things that you feel not confident in when it comes to making decisions for your family? What are the places or what are the areas that you are seeking to become more confident in? Let me know. Let's continue this conversation. If you loved this episode, I would love for you to share it with a friend, give it a review over on iTunes or wherever you love to listen to podcasts. And of course, please continue this journey with me now towards 9 kids. Even when I say it, I'm like, wowza. My journey towards 9 kids. I just found out I am 14 weeks pregnant, which puts me at a January 6th due date. And continue to journey with me over here on YouTube. So ensure you subscribe so that you can get notified when I go live every Friday at 12 p.m. East. It is a joy to spend some time with you. We have got some really, really fun guests over the next few weeks. We have got my beautiful friend Morgan Gist McDonald, who is I'm going to be grilling her on her entrepreneurial journey. You do not want to miss that one. I have got some beautiful mamas who are authors and um, influencers in the YouTube space who are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we've got lots of fun things happening over on the Possibility Mom Live. So grateful, so happy to spend some time with you and have a great day. See you next time.